Greetings, my name is Eric Cox, Liberty University, and this is my thesis proposal on leadership storytelling as an effective communication tool. Psalms 145:4 tells us that one generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. Storytelling is one of the most powerful tools that humans possess, predating our written communication efforts. Cultures from the campfire to the corporate boardroom tell us who they are and what's important to them through their stories. As leadership and management trends come and go, and modern workplaces search for ways to more effectively reach their people, studies are beginning to point to an ancient and intrinsic art form as an answer to complex problems within the organization. Traditionally, business has relied on harder forms of information and knowledge to effectively communicate within the organizational structures. Information that can be quantified, calculated, classified, analyzed, and measured have been the language of choice. But as modern organizations find themselves navigating increasingly complex challenges and cross-cultural landscapes, they have found themselves examining the leader's role in creating and shaping narratives to carry the message. But what lessons do stories communicate and how? That's the focus of this study, by exploring not only the current research and literature in the field, but by conducting additional research about leader and follower experience with leadership storytelling. Many studies have already been conducted into how leadership storytelling can be used by leaders as an effective communication tool. I found limitations to the existing leadership literature as well. Where many of these studies fell short is how this is accomplished. The other area that's lacking in the field is how storytelling is used within military organizations by leaders as both historical and contemporary motivation tools. This study will seek to remedy both these deficiencies by exploring how leader storytelling works to impact effective communication and how it has been and continues to be used within military organizations. To accomplish the goals of this study, the approach chosen was a qualitative one as laid out by Creswell. A thorough literature review begins in order to understand the scope of the existing literature in the field. Leadership is about reaching people. Leadership requires reaching followers on a deeper level, getting them to buy into the leader's vision and message. Books and seminars have been filled with the latest trends in how to best accomplish this. But increasingly, leaders are leaning on a softer skill to help them lead, motivate, and inspire their troops in a way that no vision statement ever could. This review of literature will serve to examine the diverse studies and works to get a view of what scholars have to say about how and why leaders use this approach to their communication. The historical background and various definitions of storytelling and stories are laid out for clarification and shared understanding of the reader. This is followed by examining the qualitative approach found in all the research on the topic and why this makes sense, as Creswell states, for, quote, those looking at research that honors an inductive style. The positive impacts revealed by research will be examined to include sense-making, impression management, managing change, and sharing of values. Methodologies that weren't already examined or discussed, as well as limitations to both the approach and the scope of research, with suggestions for further research. Finally, a biblical perspective on storytelling and how the Bible can provide examples of lessons on both leadership and storytelling is examined and discussed. How do researchers define stories and storytelling? According to Snyder, stories are narrated or written information that serves to enrich our understanding of an organization and its people. Lugemeyer, Sutunen, and Suhonen further identify a subset or category of storytelling called serious storytelling, which is a serious narrative or that which is thoughtful or relates to a matter of importance. Therefore, all further storytelling referred to in this thesis proposal can be considered of the serious storytelling variety. The prevailing approach to studying storytelling and its effect on leadership communication was overwhelmingly qualitative, which leads to some of the limitations found in the research. Since little to no quantitative data exists to corroborate any claims about leadership storytelling, some scientists, social or otherwise, might be quick to dismiss any findings. Brown et al. Were quick to point out that Eisenhart felt that stories are not the same as serious research, and that serious scientists, storytelling is related to playfulness and immaturity. Finally, it's worth examining what the Bible offers as an example of storytelling and leadership. The Bible is, of course, both a complete story from God to his creation and full of stories to make lessons relatable to humankind, most notably the parables of Jesus. Biblical stories are designed to, quote, teach us about the human condition and human beings' encounters with God. This is Levine. It's important to note at this point the research methodology that I chose to use for this study. Creswell suggests that with a qualitative research, we stay away from why questions that lend themselves to quantitative research. Steady recommends that we start our research with words what or how to convey an open and emerging design, and that's what I chose to do for this study. Therefore, my first question for this research is, what impact does storytelling have in leadership communication? And secondly, how does storytelling affect leadership communication? I plan to follow Creswell's suggested model in choosing site and participants, utilizing myself as a key instrument, making use of a wide array of research data, building themes, and taking a holistic view of the topic. Froggett tells us that there are three main sources of qualitative data. These are derived from experience through observation, inquiry from interviews, and examination of documentation and material produced by others. I will be using all of the mentioned sources in my approach to this study. For a research site, there are two locations and sources that I plan to gather for my data. First, I plan to utilize the extensive research from the field. There are numerous studies I was able to find and review on the topic of leadership storytelling from multiple perspectives. The second site I plan to utilize is what Creswell terms my own backyard. In this particular case, that will be the Air Force Base to which I'm assigned, utilizing that as my research site. Which brings me to my participants. Who will my participants be? I plan to actually utilize this backyard and my access to it to get the perspective of both junior Air Force members who are up-and-coming leaders, my peers as Air Force leaders, and senior Air Force leaders to get their perspective and experience with Air Force storytelling and what impact it's had on their careers. I would be remiss at this point if I did not acknowledge the researcher's role. We're told in numerous cases to be aware of inherent biases in the researcher. With 23 years of Air Force experience, 10 of which has been spent in leadership development, I need to be aware that while my experience brings a certain benefit to this particular study, it can have inherent biases that I need to be aware of to keep me from jumping to any conclusions in my hypothesis. The types of data that I plan to gather include, as discussed, field research already conducted on the subject first and foremost. Another type of data I'll be incorporating will be the anecdotal, as I share my own experiences and those shared with me to illustrate the impact that storytelling can have on individuals. To analyze the data, we'll include a collection of all of the above mentioned sources: previously conducted research, my own experiences, field research chosen at the chosen Air Force site with participants to add to the corporate participants already studied, and examples of memorable leadership stories. The data will then be separated by subset and theme. What I hope to determine is what was learned and what emerged. With all of this qualitative data collected, questions asked and answered, and observations conducted, the results must be posted. At this point, I should be able to definitively answer the questions posed in the research and find the data either refuted or confirm my hypothesis. But since I did not start with a why question, but a how, in the findings I should be able to give a summary of the results of the study. Here there should be a breakdown of what the impact of leadership storytelling is. I hope to answer the questions that Alcorn and Stein posed when they said, why do stories influence hearts and minds in a way that the cold power of logic, science, and facts fail to do? Studies like this one do not exist in a vacuum. Storytelling is not a new human skill or concept. It's been an entrenched part of the human experience from the very beginning of humankind. What is new is the application to modern leadership and organizational culture. To that end, the goal of this study is to determine the impact that storytelling has on leadership communication and how storytelling affects leader communication. I utilized a qualitative approach in my study. The existing research on the subject was reviewed for its benefit and its deficiencies. Drawing from my own experience, research documentation from others on the subject, and field interview from leaders, followers, and peers at the Air Force Base where I am assigned, a methodology was chosen. I've endeavored to identify any potential pitfalls to using myself as a researcher and using my own backyard as a research site. A biblical perspective was examined, illuminating that the Bible itself communicates through storytelling. Once the study is conducted and research examined, I hope to bring a new perspective to how leadership storytelling impacts effective communication. Once again, my name is Eric Cox from Liberty University. This has been my thesis proposal on leadership storytelling as an effective communication tool. Thank you again for your time.